Marcus wiped down the bar counter for the third time that evening, his eyes scanning the nearly empty restaurant. It was almost midnight on a Tuesday, and the last few customers were finishing their meals. As a server at Romano's, an upscale, Italian restaurant in downtown Chicago, he had seen all kinds of people walk through those doors. But tonight felt different somehow. The rain hammered against the large windows, creating a rhythmic drumming that filled the quiet spaces between conversations. Marcus had been working double shifts for the past month, trying to save enough money to help his younger sister pay for her college textbooks. Every extra dollar mattered, and he never turned down overtime when it was offered. "Marcus, table. 7 needs another bottle of wine," called out Jenny, his fellow server, as she rushed past with a tray of desserts. He nodded and headed toward the wine cellar but stopped when he heard raised voices coming from the private dining area. Through the glass partition, he could see a woman in an expensive business suit gesturing wildly at 2 men in similar attire. Her voice was getting louder, and other diners were starting to turn their heads. The men looked uncomfortable, checking their watches frequently and exchanging worried glances. "I don't care what the board thinks," the woman shouted, her words slightly slurred. "This company was built on innovation, not fear." She stumbled, slightly as she stood up, gripping the table for support. Marcus recognized the signs immediately. His father had struggled with alcohol for years before getting sober, and he knew when someone had crossed the line from social drinking to something more serious. The woman was clearly intoxicated, and her companion seemed more interested in leaving than helping her. One of the men stood up abruptly. "Sarah, we need to discuss this tomorrow when you're feeling better." He threw some cash on the table and headed for the exit, followed quickly by the other man. "Don't you dare walk away from me," Sarah called after them. But they were already pushing through the restaurant's front door into the stormy night. Marcus watched as the woman, now identified as Sarah, slumped back into her chair. She reached for her wine glass with shaking hands, nearly knocking it over in the process. The few remaining customers in the restaurant were openly staring now, and Marcus could see his manager approaching the private dining area with a concerned expression. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" The manager asked politely but firmly. "Perhaps we could call you a taxi." Sarah looked up at him with unfocused eyes. "A taxi? Do you know who I am?" She tried to stand again, this time more successfully, though she swayed dangerously. "I'm Sarah Chen, CEO of TechFlow Industries. I don't need a taxi. I need my driver." She fumbled through her expensive purse, pulling out a phone with a cracked screen. Her fingers struggled to work the touchscreen and she nearly dropped the device twice. After several failed attempts to make a call, she threw the phone back into her purse in frustration. "My driver's not answering," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Those idiots probably told him to leave too. Marcus stepped forward, his natural instinct to help overriding any hesitation. "Excuse me, Ms. Chen, I'm Marcus. I work here. Is there someone else we could call for you? Family, maybe?" Sarah looked at him with a mixture of surprise and suspicion. Most people either avoided her when she was in this state or tried to take advantage of the situation. This young man seemed genuinely concerned. "Family?" She laughed bitterly. "My family stopped talking to me years ago. They said I work too much, drink too much, care too little." Her voice cracked slightly on the last words. Maybe they were right. Marcus glanced at his manager, who nodded slightly, giving him permission to handle the situation. The restaurant was nearly empty now, and they just wanted to close without any incidents. "Ms. Chen, the weather's getting worse out there. Why don't you sit down for a few minutes while I get you some coffee?" Marcus suggested gently. "I don't want coffee," Sarah replied, but she did sit back down. "I want to know why everyone always leaves. Business partners, friends, family, they all say the same thing eventually. Sarah, you need help. But when I actually need help, where are they?" Marcus poured her a glass of water and set it on the table. "Sometimes the people who care about us most are the ones who seem to leave. They're not abandoning us. They're protecting themselves while hoping we'll figure things out." Sarah stared at him for a long moment. "You sound like you know something about that." "My dad struggled with drinking for a while," Marcus admitted. I was angry at him for years, but I never stopped loving him. Sometimes loving someone means stepping back when they're not ready to accept help. The restaurant's lights dimmed as the kitchen staff finished cleaning up. Marcus realized his shift had ended 20 minutes ago, but he couldn't just leave this woman alone in her current state. "Ms. Chen, where do you live? I could drive you home if you'd like. My car's not fancy, but it's reliable and the roads are getting dangerous with all this rain." Sarah looked at him suspiciously again. "Why would you do that? You don't know me. I could be a terrible person. I probably am a terrible person." "Everyone deserves to get home safely," Marcus replied simply. "And terrible people don't usually worry about whether they're terrible or not." For the first time that evening, Sarah smiled slightly. "You're either very naive or very kind. I haven't decided which yet." Marcus helped her gather her belongings and steady herself as they walked toward the exit. The rain had intensified, and wind whipped through the empty streets. His old Honda Civic sat in the restaurant's small parking lot, looking particularly humble next to the few expensive cars that remained. "That's your car?" Sarah asked, not unkindly, just surprised. "It gets me where I need to go," Marcus replied, opening the passenger door for her. "Where am I taking you?" Sarah gave him an address in one of Chicago's most exclusive neighborhoods, nearly an hour away with normal traffic. Marcus calculated quickly in his head. The drive would use up gas money he'd planned to save, and he'd get home very late, but he couldn't abandon her now. As they pulled out of the parking lot into the storm, neither of them could have imagined how this simple act of kindness would change both their lives forever. The drive through Chicago's rain-soaked streets was mostly silent at first. Marcus focused on the road while Sarah stared out the passenger window, watching the city lights blur past in streaky colors. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the heavy downpour, and Marcus had to lean forward to see clearly through the windshield. "Take the next exit," Sarah said quietly, breaking the silence that had settled between them. Her voice was clearer now, the coffee and water from the restaurant seeming to help slightly. Marcus followed her directions, turning onto increasingly expensive-looking streets lined with tall trees and iron gates. The neighborhood was a stark contrast to his own modest apartment building across town. Each house seemed larger than the last, with perfectly manicured lawns and circular driveways. "You know, I built my company from nothing," Sarah said suddenly, her voice carrying a mix of pride and sadness. 12 years ago, I was working 18-hour days in a tiny office above a pizza shop. I had 3 employees and a dream that most people thought was impossible. Marcus glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the winding road. "What kind of company is it?" "Software development, specializing in artificial intelligence applications for healthcare. We create programs that help doctors diagnose diseases faster and more accurately." Sarah's voice grew stronger as she talked about her work. "Last year, our software helped identify cancer in over 10,000 patients who might have been missed by traditional screening methods." "That's incredible," Marcus said, genuine admiration in his voice. "You must have saved a lot of lives." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "That's what I tell myself when I can't sleep at night. That all the sacrifices were worth it because we're helping people, but sometimes I wonder if I've lost more than I've gained." They turned into a gated community, and Sarah reached into her purse for a remote control to open the entrance. The gates swung open slowly, revealing tree-lined streets with houses that looked more like small mansions. "Third house on the right," Sarah directed, pointing to a beautiful colonial-style home with a circular driveway and impressive front garden. Even in the rain, Marcus could see it was meticulously maintained. As they pulled into the driveway, Sarah made no move to get out of the car. She sat quietly, staring at her house as if seeing it for the first time. "It's beautiful," Marcus said, meaning it. "It's empty," Sarah replied flatly. 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a kitchen I never use, and a dining room table that seats 12 people. I can't remember the last time more than one person sat at that table." Marcus turned off the engine, and the sound of rain on the car roof became more prominent. "Why did you buy such a big house?" Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Because I could afford it. Because I thought it would show everyone that I had made it." Because I thought maybe if I had a beautiful home, I might actually want to spend time in it instead of at the office. She fumbled with her seatbelt, her coordination still affected by the alcohol. Marcus reached over to help her, and she didn't. Protest, did it work? He asked gently. What do you think? Sarah gestured toward the dark house. I leave for work at 6 in the morning and come home after midnight most days. I know my neighbors' names from the Homeowners Association newsletters, but I've never had a real conversation with any of them. Marcus understood loneliness. Since starting college and working multiple jobs, he'd felt isolated too, though his circumstances were very different. Sometimes success isn't what we thought it would look like. You're very wise for someone so young, Sarah observed, studying his face in the dim light from the dashboard. How old are you? 23, Marcus replied, working my way through business school at night. I want to start my own company someday, though nothing as ambitious as yours. Business school, Sarah repeated thoughtfully. What kind of company do you want to start? Marcus hesitated. His dream seemed small compared to her achievements. I want to open a chain of community centers in low-income neighborhoods, places where kids can get tutoring, adults can take classes, families can access resources they need, make them self-sustaining, through partnerships with local businesses. Sarah turned in her seat to face him fully. That's not a small dream, Marcus. That's exactly the kind of dream I used to have before I got caught up in profit margins and market share. The rain began to lighten slightly, and Marcus could see Sarah's house more clearly now. It really was beautiful, but it felt cold and unwelcoming despite its grandeur. Would you like me to walk you to the door? Marcus offered. Sarah nodded, and they both got out of the car. The walkway to her front door was lined with expensive-looking plants and subtle lighting that automatically illuminated their path. Sarah walked more steadily now, but Marcus stayed close in case she needed support. At the front door, she struggled with her keys, dropping them twice, before Marcus gently took them from her and unlocked the door. The house was dark inside, and Sarah flipped on several switches, revealing an immaculately decorated foyer with marble floors and a crystal chandelier. Would you like to come in for a few minutes? Sarah asked. I should at least offer you coffee or something for driving. Me all this way? Marcus checked his watch. It was nearly 2 in the morning, and he had classes the next day. But something about Sarah's tone made him think she really didn't want to be alone just yet. Just for a few minutes, he agreed. The inside of the house was even more impressive than the exterior. Everything looked expensive and perfectly placed, like a showroom rather than a home. There were no personal photos visible, no books lying around, no signs that anyone actually lived there. Sarah led him to a spacious kitchen, with granite countertops and professional-grade appliances. She moved around the space awkwardly, as if she wasn't familiar with her own kitchen. I'm not sure I have regular coffee, she admitted, opening several cabinets. I usually just grab something on my way to work. Oh, here's some instant coffee. Is that okay? That's fine, Marcus assured her, taking a seat on one of the bar stools at the kitchen island. As Sarah waited for the water to boil, she leaned against the counter and studied him. Marcus, can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you help me tonight? Really? You could have just let the manager handle it, gone home on time, minded your own business. Most people would have. Marcus thought about his answer carefully. My dad always told me that kindness is free to give but priceless to receive. I guess I learned that some of the most important moments in life happen when we choose to help someone, instead of walking away. Even strangers? Especially strangers. They're the ones who need it most because they don't have anyone else. Sarah poured hot water over the instant coffee and handed him a mug. Her hands were steadier now and her eyes seemed more focused. I haven't had a real conversation with another person in months, she admitted quietly. I mean, I talk to employees, board members, clients, but not like this. Not honestly. It gets easier with practice, Marcus said with a gentle smile. Sarah sat down across from him at the kitchen island. The space between them felt comfortable despite having just met. Tell me about your family. You mentioned a sister who needs textbook money? Marcus's face lit up when he talked about his sister Emma. She's a sophomore at Northwestern studying pre-med. Smartest person I know. She wants to be a pediatric surgeon, and she'll be amazing at it. I'm just trying to help, however I can. And your parents? My mom works 2 jobs to help pay for Emma's school. My dad's been sober for 3 years now and works construction. We're not wealthy, but we're close. Every Sunday, we have dinner together no matter what. Marcus paused. What about your family? Sarah's expression darkened. Like I said, we don't talk much anymore. My parents think I've become someone they don't recognize. My brother thinks I'm obsessed with work and money. My sister... She trailed off. Your sister what? She died 5 years ago. Car accident. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. We hadn't spoken in 2 months because of some stupid argument about me missing her birthday party for a business meeting. Marcus reached across the island and gently touched her hand. I'm so sorry. That's when the drinking started getting worse, and the working longer hours. If I stay busy enough, I don't have to think about all the things I can't change. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both lost in their own thoughts. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to pass, and the first hints of dawn were visible through the kitchen windows. Marcus glanced at his watch and realized he'd been at Sarah's house for over an hour. The coffee had helped wake him up, but he needed to get home to grab a few hours of sleep before his morning classes. I should probably head home, he said, reluctantly standing up from the bar stool. I have an economics exam at 9. Sarah looked disappointed but nodded understanding. Of course. I'm sorry for keeping you so late. You've already done more than enough. As they walked toward the front door, Sarah seemed to be moving more normally. The combination of time, coffee, and conversation had helped her sober up considerably. She was no longer the unsteady, emotional woman he'd encountered at the restaurant. Marcus, she called as he reached for the door handle. Thank you. Not just for the ride, but for listening. I can't remember the last time someone treated me like a regular person instead of a business card. You are a regular person, Marcus replied simply. Success doesn't change that, even when it feels like it does. Sarah smiled, and for the first time that evening it reached her eyes. Be careful driving home. The roads might still be slick. Marcus nodded and headed back to his car. As he backed out of the driveway, he could see Sarah silhouetted in her doorway, watching him leave. Something about the image stayed with him during the drive home. This successful, powerful woman standing alone in the entrance of her big, empty house. His apartment was a 40-minute drive away in a much different neighborhood. The building was old but well-maintained, and Marcus shared a small 2-bedroom unit with his college roommate, David. He tried to enter quietly, but David was still awake, studying at the kitchen table. Dude, where have you been? David asked, looking up from his textbooks. I was starting to worry. You're never this late getting home from Romano's. Marcus grabbed a bottle of water from their small refrigerator and sat down across from his roommate. I helped someone get home safely. Long story. Must have been some story to keep you out until 3 in the morning. Marcus found himself telling David about the evening, Sarah's condition at the restaurant, her business colleagues leaving her behind, the drive to her house and their conversation in her kitchen. David listened without interrupting, which was one of the things Marcus appreciated most about his roommate. So she's like, really successful? David asked when Marcus finished. CEO of a tech company that creates medical software. Lives in a house that probably costs more than we'll make in the next 10 years combined. And she was drinking alone at Romano's on a Tuesday night because Marcus thought about Sarah's words. Because success isn't the same thing as happiness, I guess. She's achieved everything she thought she wanted, but she's lost everything that actually matters. David nodded thoughtfully. My dad always says that climbing the corporate ladder is only worthwhile if it's leaning against the right wall. That's a good way to put it. Marcus yawned, suddenly feeling exhausted. I need to get some sleep. 3 hours isn't much, but it'll have to do. The next morning came too quickly. Marcus dragged himself out of bed, showered, and grabbed a quick breakfast before heading to campus. His economics class was challenging on a good day, and trying to concentrate with minimal sleep proved nearly impossible. His professor droned on about market equilibrium, while Marcus fought to keep his eyes open. During his lunch break, Marcus worked a shift at the campus bookstore, his second job. The work was mindless, restocking shelves, helping students find textbooks, manning the cash register, which gave him time to think about the previous evening. He wondered how Sarah was feeling today. Was she embarrassed about her condition? Last night? Did she remember their conversation? Would she go back to her pattern of working excessive hours and drinking to cope with her loneliness? Around 3 o'clock, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but he answered anyway. "Hello, is this Marcus?" The voice was female, professional, and completely unfamiliar. "Yes, this is Marcus. My name is Janet, and I'm calling from TechFlow Industries. Ms. Chen would like to speak with you if you have a moment." Marcus nearly dropped his phone. Sarah had tracked down his number somehow and was calling him at work. His supervisor gave him a questioning look, so Marcus stepped outside the bookstore. "Sure, put her through." There was a brief pause, then Sarah's voice came on the line. She sounded completely different than she had the night before. Confident, articulate, and very much in control. "Marcus, I hope I'm not disturbing you. I wanted to call and properly thank you for your kindness last night." "You don't need to thank me, Ms. Chen. Anyone would have done the same thing. Please call me Sarah, and no, not everyone would have done what you did. Most people would have looked the other way." Her tone softened slightly. "I also wanted to apologize for my condition last night. That's not typically how I handle business dinners." Marcus could hear the embarrassment in her voice. "You don't need to apologize to me, Sarah. We all have difficult days." "I'd like to take you to lunch," Sarah said abruptly. "Not as an apology, but because I enjoyed our conversation last night more than any business meeting I've had in months. Would you be free this Saturday?" Marcus was surprised by the invitation. He'd assumed their interaction was a one-time event, a brief moment of connection that would fade into memory. Yes, I think I could do Saturday." "Wonderful. There's a small cafe called Sunrise Kitchen on Oak Street. Do you know it? It's nothing fancy, but they have excellent food and it's quiet enough for actual conversation." Marcus smiled. She'd chosen a modest location, probably remembering his comment about his car and wanting him to feel comfortable. "I know the place. What time? Would noon work for you?" "Perfect. I'll see you Saturday at noon." After they hung up, Marcus stood outside the bookstore for a few minutes processing what had just happened. A successful CEO wanted to have lunch with him. Not for business reasons, but apparently because she'd enjoyed talking to him. David was incredulous when Marcus told him about the phone call that evening. "She wants to be friends with you? Dude, she's probably worth millions." "I don't think it's about money," Marcus replied, though he wasn't entirely sure what it was about. "I think she's just lonely and doesn't have many people in her life she can talk to honestly. Or maybe she's interested in you romantically." Marcus shook his head immediately. "No, it's not like that. She's dealing with some personal stuff, and for some reason, she feels comfortable talking to me about it. There's nothing romantic about it." But as Saturday approached, Marcus found himself thinking more and more about Sarah. Not romantically, as David had suggested, but with a growing curiosity about her life and her story. How did someone build a successful company but end up drinking alone? What had happened to make her family stop talking to her? And why had she chosen him, of all people, to open up to? Saturday morning, Marcus took extra care getting ready. He didn't own many nice clothes, but he found a clean button-down shirt and his best pair of jeans. Looking in the mirror, he realized he was nervous, though he couldn't exactly say why. Sunrise Kitchen was busy when he arrived, filled with families. Enjoying weekend brunch? Marcus spotted Sarah immediately, sitting at a corner table by the window. She looked completely different than she had Tuesday night. Professional, but relaxed, wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of her business suit. She waved when she saw him, and Marcus made his way over to her table. As he sat down, he noticed she looked well-rested and alert, with no signs of the distress she'd shown earlier in the week. "Thank you for coming," Sarah said, smiling warmly. "I wasn't sure if you'd show up. I thought maybe you'd remember Tuesday night and decide you didn't want to get involved with someone who has that many problems. Everyone has problems, Marcus replied. The difference is whether we face them alone or with help from other people. Sarah studied his face for a moment. You really believe that, don't you? That people are fundamentally good and worth helping? I believe that everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were yesterday, Marcus said, including me. Over the next 2 hours, Marcus and Sarah talked like old friends. The conversation flowed naturally from topic to topic. Her company's latest projects, his studies, their different perspectives on success and happiness. Sarah seemed genuinely interested in Marcus's life, asking detailed questions about his classes, his family, and his dreams for the future. You mentioned wanting to start community centers, Sarah said as they shared a piece of apple pie. Have you given any thought to the business model? How would you make them sustainable? Marcus's eyes lit up as he began explaining his ideas. He'd spent countless hours thinking about this, sketching plans in notebooks during slow shifts at work. The key would be partnerships. Local businesses could sponsor programs in exchange for employee training opportunities. Healthcare providers could offer free clinics in exchange for community outreach. Universities could provide tutoring services for internship credits. Sarah listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed she understood both the vision and the practical challenges involved. Marcus found himself going into more detail than he'd ever shared with anyone, even David. What about funding for the initial setup? Sarah asked. Real estate, equipment, staffing, that requires significant capital. That's the biggest obstacle, Marcus admitted. I've been looking into grants, but most require you to already have a proven track record. It's hard to get experience when no one will give you a chance to gain experience. Sarah nodded knowingly. The classic startup problem. I faced the same thing with TechFlow. Banks wouldn't lend to me because I didn't have collateral, but I couldn't build collateral without the loans. How did you solve it? I worked 3 jobs for 2 years, saved every penny I could, and started in the smallest possible way. 1 employee, 1 client, 1 product. Then I used the success from that to build something bigger. Marcus had heard similar advice before, but coming from someone who had actually done it, the words carried more weight. Did you ever doubt yourself? Wonder if you were crazy for trying? Every single day, Sarah laughed. Especially the first year. I was working 18-hour days, eating ramen noodles for every meal, and living in an apartment that was smaller than my current bathroom. There were nights I'd lie awake thinking I should just give up and get a regular job. What kept you going? Sarah was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. At first it was stubbornness. I wanted to prove that I could do it. Later it became about the impact we were making. When I got the first letter from a doctor saying our software had helped save a patient's life, everything else seemed worth it. Do you still feel that way? That's a complicated question. Sarah looked out the window at the busy street. The company is successful beyond anything I imagined when I started. We've helped thousands of patients, created hundreds of jobs, generated millions in revenue. By every conventional measure, I've succeeded. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of why I was doing it. Success became an addiction. Every milestone I reached just made me want to reach a bigger one. I kept thinking that the next promotion, the next contract, the next acquisition would finally make me happy. Marcus understood that feeling more than he cared to admit. Even working toward his relatively modest goals, he sometimes found himself so focused on the future that he forgot to appreciate the present. Tuesday night wasn't the first time I've had too much to drink, Sarah continued. It's become my way of dealing with stress, loneliness, disappointment. I tell myself it's just temporary, just until I get through the next big project, but there's always another project. Have you thought about getting help? You mean therapy? I've considered it, but... She trailed off, looking embarrassed. But what? It feels like admitting failure, like saying that all my success doesn't matter if I can't even manage my own life. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Sarah, what you built is incredible, but taking care of your mental health isn't about failure. It's about being smart enough to maintain what you've worked so hard to create. Sarah met his eyes. You really are wise for 23. I'm not wise. I'm just objective. It's easier to see clearly when you're looking at someone else's life instead of your own. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the activity on the street outside. Families walked by with children, couples held hands, friends laughed together. It was the kind of normal Saturday afternoon that Sarah rarely experienced in her carefully controlled world. Marcus, can I tell you something that might sound strange? Of course. Tuesday night was the first time in years that I felt like someone saw me as a person instead of a position. Not Sarah, the CEO, not the woman who built TechFlow from nothing, not the business contact who might be useful someday. Just Sarah. Marcus smiled gently. That doesn't sound strange at all, it sounds human. I've been thinking about our conversation all week, about your community center idea, about finding balance, about what success really means. Sarah paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. I want to help you. Help me how? With your community center project. I have access to resources, connections, experience that could help you avoid some of the mistakes I made. And honestly, I think working on something with clear social impact might remind me why I started my own company in the first place. Marcus was stunned. Sarah, I appreciate the offer, but I can't accept charity. I need to do this on my own, prove that I can. It wouldn't be charity, Sarah interrupted. It would be a business partnership. You have the vision, the passion, and the understanding of what these communities need. I have the business experience and financial resources. Together, we could create something that neither of us could build alone. I don't understand. Why would you want to partner with me? You barely know me. Sarah smiled. Because in one evening, you showed me more genuine kindness than I've experienced from people I've known for years. Because you dream about helping others instead of just helping yourself. Because when I was at my worst, you didn't judge me or try to take advantage. You just helped. Marcus felt overwhelmed. This wasn't what he'd expected when he'd driven Sarah home Tuesday night. This is happening so fast. I need time to think about it. Of course, take all the time you need. But Marcus, don't let pride keep you from accepting help when it's offered freely. I made that mistake with my own family and I regret it every day. As they prepared to leave the cafe, Sarah picked up the check despite Marcus's protests. Let me ask you something, she said as they walked toward the door. What did you think when you first saw me Tuesday night? Marcus considered lying, but their conversation had been built on honesty. I thought you looked like someone who was very successful but also very lonely. Someone who had everything they thought they wanted but felt empty anyway. And now? Now I think you're someone who's ready to remember what really matters. They stood outside the cafe, the afternoon sun warming their faces. Sarah extended her hand for a formal handshake, then seemed to change her mind and gave Marcus a brief hug instead. Thank you, Marcus. For Tuesday night, for today, for treating me like a friend instead of a business opportunity. Thank you for trusting me with your story. As Sarah walked toward her car, a modest sedan rather than the luxury vehicle Marcus had expected, she turned back once more. Marcus, I want you to know that I called my parents this morning. We're having dinner Sunday for the first time in 8 months. Marcus felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. That's wonderful, Sarah. It's a start, she replied. Sometimes that's all we need. As Marcus watched her drive away, he realized that helping Sarah get home safely had done more than just ensure her physical well-being. It had started both of them on a journey toward something they'd been missing: genuine human connection and a renewed sense of purpose. He pulled out his phone to call David, eager to share the events of the afternoon. But first, he had his own phone call to make. His parents would want to hear about his economics exam, his work at the bookstore, and his plans for Sunday dinner. For the first time in months, Marcus felt grateful not just for his dreams of the future, but for the relationships and simple pleasures that made his current life meaningful. 3 weeks passed before Marcus heard from Sarah again. He'd given her his phone number but hadn't wanted to seem pushy by calling first. During that time, he found himself thinking about their conversation frequently, wondering how her dinner with her parents had gone and whether she was serious about the business partnership she'd proposed. The call came on a Wednesday evening while Marcus was studying for midterm exams. He almost didn't answer the unfamiliar number, thinking it might be a telemarketer. "Marcus, it's Sarah. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" "Of course. How are you? How did dinner with your parents go?" Sarah's laugh sounded lighter than he remembered. "Better than I expected, worse than I hoped. We're talking again, which is progress, but there's a lot of trust to rebuild. My mom cried when she saw me, which broke my heart because I realized how much weight I'd lost from stress and poor eating habits. But you're moving in the right direction." "Yes, slowly. I've also started seeing a therapist. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that my drinking wasn't just about stress. It was about avoiding emotions I didn't want to deal with." Sarah paused. "But I'm not calling to talk about me. I'm calling because I have a proposition." Marcus set down his economics textbook, giving her his full attention. "I'm listening." "I've spent the last 3 weeks researching your community center concept. I've talked to social workers, education specialists, local government officials, and nonprofit directors. Marcus, your idea isn't just good, it's brilliant, and it's exactly what several neighborhoods in Chicago desperately need." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. "What kind of research did you do?" "I hired a consulting firm to conduct a feasibility study. They identified 3 locations where your model would have the highest impact and the best chance of success. I also had my legal team research the regulatory requirements and my finance team create preliminary budgets." "Sarah, you didn't need to do all that." "Yes, I did. Because I don't make business decisions based on emotions anymore. I needed to know if this was a sound investment or just a wealthy woman's guilt project." Her voice became more excited. "Marcus, the numbers are incredible. With the right funding and execution, we could serve over 1,500 families in the first year alone." Marcus stood up from his desk, pacing around his small bedroom. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A 50-50 partnership. I provide the initial capital and business infrastructure. You provide the vision, community connections, and day-to-day management. We start with one location, prove the concept works, then expand systematically." "How much initial capital are we talking about?" $200,000 for the first 18 months. That covers lease deposits, equipment, initial staffing, and operating expenses, while we build revenue streams." Marcus nearly dropped his phone. $200,000 was more money than his family had ever possessed combined. "Sarah, I can't be responsible for that much money. What if I mess it up? What if the whole thing fails? Then we learn from our mistakes and try again." "Marcus, I've started dozens of projects over the years. Some succeeded wildly, others failed completely. The only real failure is not trying at all. I need time to think about this. It's overwhelming." "Of course. But before you decide, I want you to see something. Are you free Saturday morning?" "I work at the bookstore until noon on Saturdays." "What time do you start?" 8 o'clock. "Perfect. Meet me at 1247 South Ashland Avenue at 7:30 Saturday morning. There's something I want to show you before you make your decision." "After." They hung up. Marcus sat in stunned silence for several minutes. David found him still sitting on his bed staring at his phone when he returned from his evening class. "Dude, you look like you've seen a ghost. What's wrong?" Marcus told David about Sarah's call, the feasibility study, and the partnership offer. David listened with increasing amazement, occasionally interrupting with questions or expressions of disbelief. $200,000, David repeated when Marcus finished. "She's willing to invest $200,000 in your idea?" "Apparently." "Marcus, this is incredible. This is everything you've been dreaming about. Or it's a disaster waiting to happen." "David, what do I know about running a business? About managing employees? About handling that kind of responsibility?" David sat down on his own bed facing Marcus. "What did you know about helping drunk CEOs get home safely? What did you know about having lunch with millionaires? You figured those things out because you cared about doing them right." Marcus appreciated his roommate's confidence, but the magnitude of Sarah's offer felt overwhelming. "What if I disappoint Or what if I prove that her faith in me was misplaced? What if you change hundreds of lives for the better? What if you create something amazing that outlasts both of you? David leaned forward. Marcus, you've been working toward this dream for years. Now someone is offering to help you make it real. Don't let fear stop you from saying yes. That night, Marcus barely slept. He kept running scenarios in his head, imagining everything that could go right and everything that could go wrong. He thought about the families who might benefit from the community center, the programs they could offer, the impact they might have on the neighborhood. He also thought about Sarah and how much this partnership might mean to her. She'd talked about wanting to remember why she'd started her company in the first place. Maybe working on something with clear social impact would help her find the balance she'd been missing. Saturday morning came too early. Marcus arrived at the address Sarah had given him to find her waiting beside a modest building in a neighborhood he didn't recognize. The area looked like it had seen better days. Older buildings, vacant lots, few trees. But there were signs of life and community everywhere. Children played in a small park across the street. Elderly people sat on stoops, chatting with neighbors, and small businesses lined the block. "Good morning," Sarah said, smiling as Marcus approached. She was dressed casually again, jeans and a Chicago Bulls sweatshirt, and she looked more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. "Good morning. What is this place?" "This," Sarah said, gesturing to the building behind her, "is what could be our first community center. It used to be a grocery store, but it's been vacant for 2 years. The space is perfect. Large open areas for classes and activities, smaller rooms for tutoring and counseling, a commercial kitchen that could support meal programs." Marcus looked up at the building with new eyes. It was larger than he'd expected, with big windows that would let in plenty of natural light. The neighborhood around them bustled with activity, exactly the kind of area where a community center could make a real difference. "I've been talking to people in the neighborhood for the past 2 weeks," Sarah continued. "Parents who need after-school care for their children, teenagers who need job training, adults who want to learn English or get their GED. The demand is definitely here." They walked around the building together, and Sarah pointed out features that Marcus wouldn't have noticed. Good parking access, proximity to public transportation, room for expansion. She'd clearly done her homework. "Sarah, this is amazing, but I still don't understand why you want to partner with me specifically. You could hire experienced nonprofit managers, people who've done this before." Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night? About your dream for these centers?" "Not exactly. You said you wanted to create places where kids could get tutoring, adults could take classes, and families could access resources they need. But more than that, you talked about making them self-sustaining through community partnerships. You understood that the goal wasn't just to provide services, but to strengthen the entire neighborhood." Marcus nodded. He did remember that conversation. Most nonprofit managers think about programs and budgets and compliance requirements. Those things matter, but they're not the heart of the work. You think about people first, systems second. That's exactly the kind of leader this project needs. "But what if I'm not ready? What if I need more experience first?" Sarah smiled. "Marcus, nobody's ever ready for something this big. You learn by doing, by making mistakes, by getting back up and trying again. The question isn't whether you're ready, it's whether you're willing." As they walked back toward their cars, Marcus felt something shifting inside him. The fear was still there, but it was being balanced by excitement and determination. This was his chance to stop dreaming about change and start creating it. "I have one condition," Marcus said as they reached the street. "What's that?" "I want to start smaller than you're suggesting. One program, one target population, prove we can do it right before we expand. I'd rather succeed small than fail big." Sarah's smile was radiant. "That sounds like exactly the kind of careful, thoughtful approach this project needs. So we're really doing this? If you're willing, then yes, we're really doing this." As Marcus drove to work that morning, he called his parents to tell them about the opportunity. His mother cried happy tears, and his father told him how proud he was. Emma screamed with excitement when she heard the news, already offering to help with tutoring programs during her school breaks. For the first time since meeting Sarah, Marcus began to believe that this partnership might work. Not because it would be easy, but because both of them were committed to doing it right. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the main room of what was now called the Ashland Community Center, watching 12-year-old Maria explain her science project to a group of younger children. The space that had once been an empty grocery store now buzzed with activity. Teenagers worked on computers in one corner, adults practiced English conversation at round tables, and toddlers played with educational toys in a designated play area. The transformation hadn't been easy. There had been permit delays, budget overruns, and countless late nights spent figuring out problems neither Marcus nor Sarah had anticipated. But slowly, week by week, the community center had come to life. Sarah appeared beside him, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the small cafe they'd set up near the entrance. She looked different than she had that first night at Romano's. Healthier, more relaxed, genuinely happy in a way that seemed to come from deep inside rather than surface accomplishments. "Maria's project is incredible," Sarah said, handing Marcus his coffee. "Did you know she wants to be a marine biologist? She's been checking out every book about ocean life from the library. Her mom told me Maria's grades have improved dramatically since she started coming here for tutoring," Marcus replied. "She went from barely passing to honor roll in just 4 months." They watched as Maria carefully showed the younger children how different sea creatures adapted to their environments. Her confidence and enthusiasm were infectious, and Marcus felt the familiar surge of satisfaction that came from knowing they were making a real difference. "The board meeting is tomorrow," Sarah reminded him. "Are you ready to present the expansion proposal?" Marcus nodded, though he still felt nervous about formal presentations. The Ashland Community Center had exceeded all their initial projections. They were serving over 200 families regularly, had a waiting list for most programs, and had achieved financial sustainability 3 months ahead of schedule. Local businesses had embraced their partnership model enthusiastically. The medical clinic provided free health screenings twice a month. The community college offered GED prep classes. Even the grocery store chain had partnered with them to provide nutrition education and cooking classes. "I keep thinking about that night at the restaurant," Marcus said quietly. "Did you ever imagine it would lead to this?" Sarah smiled, but her expression was thoughtful. "Honestly? No. I thought I was just getting help home from a kind stranger. I had no idea that one act of compassion would change both our lives so completely." The changes in Sarah had been as dramatic as the transformation of the building around them. She still ran TechFlow Industries, but she'd hired a strong management team that allowed her to delegate more effectively. She worked reasonable hours, spent weekends with her family, and had been sober for 5 months. More importantly, she seemed to have rediscovered the passion that had driven her to start her company in the first place. The Community Center project had reminded her that business success meant nothing without positive impact on real people's lives. "Marcus, I need to tell you something," Sarah said, her tone becoming more serious. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Actually, everything's right, which is why this is so difficult." Sarah took a deep breath. "TechFlow has been approached about a potential acquisition. A much larger company wants to buy us out." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Are you going to sell?" "That depends partly on you. The offer is substantial, enough money to fund 50 community centers like this one. But it would mean stepping back from day-to-day operations at TechFlow, which would give me more time to focus on our expansion plans." "What do you want to do?" Sarah looked around the bustling center, her eyes lingering on the families who had found a second home here. "A year ago, I would have seen this as the ultimate validation of my success. A big payday, recognition from the industry, proof that I'd built something valuable. And now? Now I realize that what we've built here matters more to me than any business transaction ever could. This place, these people, this impact. This is what success actually looks like." Marcus felt a wave of relief, followed immediately by excitement about what expanded resources could mean for their work. "So you're going to sell?" "I'm going to seriously consider it. But Marcus, if we do this, if we take on that level of funding and responsibility, everything changes. We'd go from managing one center to potentially overseeing a network of them. Are you ready for that kind of growth? Before Marcus could answer, Maria ran over to them, her science project in hand. Mr. Marcus, Miss Sarah, look what I made. She'd created a detailed model of a coral reef ecosystem, complete with hand-painted fish and carefully researched explanations of how each species contributed to the whole. The project was impressive enough to belong in a high school science fair despite Maria being only in 7th grade. This is amazing, Maria, Marcus said, genuinely awed by her work. You should be proud of yourself. I couldn't have done it without the resources here, Maria replied. The books, the computer access, the quiet study space. My apartment is too noisy to concentrate, and Mrs. Rodriguez helped me understand the chemistry behind coral bleaching as Maria hurried back to her presentation. Sarah turned to Marcus with raised eyebrows. Still wondering if we're ready for that kind of growth? Marcus looked around the center once more, taking in all the activity, the learning, the connections being formed between neighbors who might never have met otherwise. In one corner, Mrs. Patterson was teaching a group of teenagers how to prepare healthy meals on a budget. Near the windows, Mr. Chen was helping adults practice for their citizenship tests. Throughout the space, children of all ages worked on homework with volunteer tutors. This was what he'd dreamed about during all those late nights at Romano's, all those double shifts at the bookstore, all those moments when his goals had seemed impossible to achieve. But it was also more than he'd dreamed, richer, more complex, more deeply connected to the real needs of the community. Sarah, do you remember what you asked me that first night, about why I helped you? You said kindness was free to give but priceless to receive. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. What we've created here isn't just about the programs we offer or the services we provide. It's about showing people that someone cares enough to invest in their potential. Sarah nodded, understanding what he was getting at. If selling TechFlow means we can show that same care to thousands more families, then yes, I'm ready for that kind of growth. But only if we promise each other that we'll never lose sight of why we started this. Deal, Sarah said, extending her hand for a shake that turned into a hug. As the afternoon wound down and families began heading home for dinner, Marcus and Sarah walked through the center one more time, turning off lights and securing equipment. The building would be quiet for a few hours, but tomorrow it would come alive again with learning, laughter, and the sound of a community growing stronger. Outside, the neighborhood looked different than it had 6 months ago. Not dramatically, transformed but subtly improved. There were fewer vacant lots, more small businesses, cleaner streets. People lingered to chat with neighbors instead of hurrying past each other. Children played outside more often, and their laughter filled the air. Marcus, Sarah said as they reached their cars, I need you to know something. That night at the restaurant when you chose to help instead of walking away, you saved more than just me. You reminded me who I wanted to be. You did the same for me, Marcus replied. You showed me that dreams don't have to stay dreams forever. As they drove away in opposite directions, both of them were already thinking about tomorrow's board meeting, about expansion plans, about the communities they could serve next. But they were also thinking about Maria's coral reef project, Mrs. Patterson's cooking class, and the dozens of small moments throughout the day when they'd witnessed people discovering their own potential. The next morning, Sarah would accept the acquisition offer for TechFlow Industries. Marcus would present their expansion proposal to a board of directors who would approve funding for 5 additional community centers. Maria would win first place in her school's science fair and decide she definitely wanted to study marine biology in college. But that evening, as Marcus had dinner with his family and Sarah shared a quiet meal with her parents, both of them understood that the most important transformation had already taken place. A chance encounter on a rainy Tuesday night had taught them both that success without compassion is meaningless, but compassion with resources can change the world. Sometimes helping someone get home safely is just the beginning of the journey.